Brianna Collins thought she knew Jake Harmon better than anyone, until one morning she glanced at his phone and uncovered a chilling message. 2 days later, Jake's mother, Carol Harmon, was found dead in her home. What started as quiet suspicion quickly unraveled into a dark web of lies, betrayal, and a murder that no one saw coming. Brianna Collins had always considered herself lucky. At 28, she had a steady job, a quiet home, and a boyfriend she trusted, or thought she did. Jake Harmon was charming in the way that made people feel safe. He had a calm voice, a clean look, and a polite way of speaking that made him likable to everyone who met him. But on a quiet Sunday morning in late October, everything began to change. The day started like any other. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floor. Brianna shuffled into the kitchen barefoot, yawning as she reached for the coffee pot. Jake was in the bathroom, taking a long shower, the sound of running water muffled behind the closed door. She reached for his phone on the counter to play music like she always did, typing in the passcode without a second thought. That's when she saw it, an unread message that instantly pulled her out of her sleepy routine. It was from a contact named E. The preview text read, "She's still a problem. If she opens her mouth, it's over for both of us." Her thumb froze above the screen. The message hadn't been opened, so she tapped it. The full thread was short but alarming. There were references to someone being a loose end, and a message that simply said, "You know what needs to be done." Then she saw a name. Carol, Jake's mother. Brianna's breath caught in her throat. Her first instinct was to rationalize. Maybe it was some weird inside joke. Maybe they were talking about a movie script or something out of context. But as she scrolled further, the tone grew darker. There were images, photos of a kitchen knife, a blurry picture of Carol's house, and one message that said, "Back. Door is never locked, quick and clean." That was the moment her hands began to shake. She backed out of the thread and locked the phone just as the shower shut off. She forced herself to act normal, placing the phone back on the counter and pouring herself a cup of coffee. But her mind was spinning. She looked at Jake as he entered the kitchen, towel around his waist, grinning casually. And suddenly she couldn't see him the same way. Everything about him felt foreign, cold, wrong. The rest of the day passed in a fog. She said little, retreating into her thoughts. Should she confront him? Should she tell someone? The messages could be fake, part of a prank, or taken out of context. But deep down, a part of her already knew the truth. Something was very wrong. She just couldn't bring herself to accept it. That night, Brianna lay awake beside Jake, staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly next to her. She couldn't stop thinking about Carol, the kind older woman who always brought over home-cooked meals and asked how her job was going. Sweet, traditional, and trusting to a fault. Why would anyone want to hurt her? She considered calling Carol, warning her, anonymously. But fear kept her paralyzed. What if Jake found out she had seen the messages? What if she was wrong and ended up ruining everything for nothing? What if, worst of all, he wasn't bluffing? 2 days later, her phone rang early in the morning. It was Jake's sister, sobbing, barely able to get the words out. Carol had been found dead in her home, stabbed, no signs of forced entry, nothing stolen. Police had no leads. Brianna sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, the phone still to her ear. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely hear what was being said. All she could think about were the messages, the photos, the knife. She had seen everything, and she had done nothing. Carol Harmon had always lived a life marked by routine. Widowed when Jake was just 7, she had spent the last 2 decades building a quiet existence. She woke up at 6:30 every morning, made the same breakfast, walked the same route through the neighborhood, and checked in with the same circle of friends from church and her old bookkeeping job. Everyone who knew her described her as gentle, cautious, and always prepared. That's why the news of her violent death shocked not just her family, but the entire community. Her neighbors were the first to notice something was wrong. Carol never missed trash day, but her bins sat untouched on the curb for 2 days. The porch light was still on in the morning, something she never forgot to switch off. Her mail was stacking up. Eventually, a neighbor used the spare key Carol had once given her for emergencies. The scene inside was horrifying. Carol had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no forced entry, just silence and blood. The detectives found something even more unsettling. The back door was unlocked. Friends insisted Carol never left doors unlocked, especially at night. The house hadn't been ransacked. Her jewelry and cash were untouched. Her car was still in the driveway. The attack hadn't been about robbery. It was personal. As investigators dug into Carol's life, they learned that she had been feeling uneasy for weeks. She had told a friend at church that she thought someone was watching her. At first, they thought she was just being cautious. Maybe it was nerves, or maybe she was overwhelmed. But then she began changing her habits. She canceled plans. She stopped walking her usual route. She told her sister over the phone that she had discovered something, but didn't want to talk about it until she was sure. Whatever she had found, she never had the chance to share it. Police questioned Jake almost immediately. He said he hadn't seen his mother in over a week. He claimed they'd spoken briefly over text, but nothing unusual had come up. He looked genuinely shaken when the detectives arrived, and there was nothing in his initial behavior to raise alarm. He explained away the unlocked door by saying his mother sometimes forgot things now that she was older. But her close friends denied this. Carol had never once left that door open, not even during the summer. Brianna watched everything unfold, from the sidelines, her stomach churning. She stayed quiet during the interviews, saying only that Carol had always been kind to her. She didn't mention the texts. She didn't bring up the images she'd seen. Fear tightened around her like a noose. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. But she still couldn't speak. What haunted her most were the small details, the way Jake's demeanor shifted just slightly when they talked about his mother, the way he never asked about funeral arrangements or suggested calling Carol's friends. He acted shocked, but not devastated, calm, but not broken. And Brianna couldn't shake the feeling that he already knew everything, that this wasn't a surprise to him at all. The police continued their investigation, combing through Carol's financials, phone records, and personal emails. They found nothing unusual at first. No threats, no warnings, no suspicious contacts. But they kept circling back to one thing: the unlocked door. Someone Carol trusted had let themselves in, or been let in. As the days passed, Brianna grew more certain that Jake was hiding something. and she was the only one who knew how deep it might go. But as much as the guilt gnawed at her, she still wasn't ready to admit what she'd seen. Because if Jake had truly gone through with what those messages suggested, then saying something now might make her his next target. 3 days after Carol Harmon's murder, investigators pulled security footage from businesses and traffic cameras within a 2-mile radius of her home. They were hoping to catch any movement that might explain how the killer had arrived and left without a trace. At 11:38 p.m. on the night of the murder, a black SUV was seen near a gas station 1 street over from Carol's neighborhood. It paused at the intersection before turning off in the direction of her house. The make and model matched Jake Harmon's vehicle. When questioned, Jake insisted he had been home that night, asleep. There were no witnesses to confirm it, and no security system in his home to back up his story. His phone GPS data showed no significant activity, but there were long gaps in the location history, gaps that could have been intentionally caused by disabling tracking. Police noted the inconsistency, but it wasn't enough to arrest him. Brianna watched all of this unfold on the local news and in short bursts of conversation with Jake himself. He seemed agitated, but not fearful. He spoke of the police as if they were a nuisance, not a threat. But what disturbed her more was what she started to remember about that night. She had woken up briefly around midnight and noticed Jake wasn't in bed. At the time, she had assumed he was in the bathroom or grabbing a drink from the kitchen. But now that detail stood out like a warning flare. That memory pushed her back into the messages. Jake had started using a password manager recently, which made it harder to access certain apps, but the messaging thread from E was still there. This time, she scrolled all the way up. The first message was dated nearly 3 weeks before Carol's death. It mentioned something about cleaning up the mess and making sure she keeps quiet. The language wasn't casual. It was deliberate, planned, and increasingly aggressive. Brianna tapped the contact name, E, and opened the contact details. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't just a nickname or random letter. The number belonged to Eli Turner, Jake's childhood friend. She recognized the name immediately. Jake had mentioned Eli only once, describing him as someone he used to be close with before a falling out. What he hadn't mentioned was Eli's criminal record, or the fact that Eli had been arrested for aggravated assault 3 years earlier, during a drug deal gone bad. The deeper she dug, the worse it became. She found a hidden folder in Jake's photo gallery. Buried among random screenshots and memes were images that didn't belong. One photo showed Carol's back door. Another was a blurry picture of her kitchen, taken from a low angle, like someone had been crouching. There was also a rough diagram of the house layout, sketched on lined notebook paper. At the bottom of the image was a caption, "Get in, get out, no mistakes." One file was labeled "Clean Up." It contained a series of voice memos, most of them too distorted to make out, but one was clear. Jake's voice said, "Just go. In and do it. Make it fast. Don't mess this up." Brianna stared at her phone in silence, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. She had enough now to go to the police, but the thought of doing so still filled her with dread. What if Jake found out before they could act? What if Eli was still out there? For the first time, she realized she wasn't just sitting on evidence. She was sitting on a ticking bomb, and it was only a matter of time before someone else got hurt. 10 days after Carol Harmon's death, the investigation took a dramatic turn. An anonymous tip was submitted through a police hotline. The voice was heavily altered, but the message was unmistakable. The caller claimed Jake Harmon and Eli Turner had conspired to kill Carol because she had discovered they were embezzling money that had been quietly funneled through a non-profit Carol once helped manage. The voice said Carol had confronted Jake weeks before her death and threatened to report him. The tip was enough to make detectives take a closer look at Carol's financial history. Years earlier, she had served as a volunteer bookkeeper for a local community outreach foundation. At the time, she had access to grant money, donations, and accounts tied to several public service programs. But after she stepped down, no one noticed anything unusual until now. Investigators reopened the financial records and followed the trail. What they found confirmed the caller's claim. Over $90,000 had gone missing from the nonprofit in small, spread-out transactions over the course of a year. The money had been quietly rerouted into a private bank account set up under a false name. But the paper trail, though buried, wasn't perfect. A connection to Jake's IP address and personal email had been buried within one of the registration forms. It wasn't definitive, but it raised serious suspicions. Carol, it seemed, had found the same thing. In her home, tucked inside a manila envelope at the bottom of a filing cabinet, detectives found copies of bank statements, printed emails, and handwritten notes. One document was labeled confidential, to be shared with police. She had started building a case on her own, and someone had stopped her just in time. As pressure mounted, detectives intensified their focus on Jake. His previous composure began to crack. His story had small inconsistencies. His phone data had missing timestamps. He couldn't provide a receipt or alibi for his whereabouts on the night of the murder. And when asked about Eli Turner, he claimed they hadn't spoken in years, a statement that would soon be proven false. With a warrant secured, investigators retrieved Jake's phone and submitted it for forensic analysis. Though he had deleted several apps and encrypted others, experts were able to recover fragments of his message history and image cache. Deleted messages between Jake and Eli surfaced. Phrases like, "She's not backing down," "We're out of time," and "You do it, I'll wait in the car," were pieced together. But the final blow came from Brianna. She had finally reached her breaking point. Racked with guilt and fear, she contacted the lead detective on the case and handed over her phone. She had quietly recorded screen captures of Jake's messages and folders. She had saved images, timestamps, and even taken a voice memo of one of the audio clips before it was deleted. Her phone had become a vault of evidence, and with it, the case against Jake and Eli became undeniable. That same day, police located Eli Turner. He was arrested without incident in a motel room 30 miles away. Faced with the weight of the evidence, he confessed to being involved in the murder. He claimed Jake had driven him to Carol's house, given him the layout, and waited outside while Eli entered through the unlocked back door. He described the murder in detail, details that had never been made public. Jake was arrested 2 days later. His mugshot showed no emotion. He denied everything, but it was too late. The lies had unraveled. The money trail, the surveillance, footage, the messages, and Brianna's recordings all told the same story. Carol had died not because of a random act of violence, but because she had uncovered a betrayal. A betrayal that cost her life. The trial began 5 months after Jake Harmon's arrest. It drew widespread attention across the state, partly because of the shocking betrayal at the center of the case, a son accused of orchestrating the murder of his own mother. The prosecution built their case piece by piece, presenting a chilling narrative of greed, deception, and manipulation. They introduced the financial records first, showing the slow siphoning of funds from the non-profit and linking the activity to an IP address traced back to Jake's home. Then came the forensic analysis of his phone, recovered messages, images, and even deleted voice memos. The jury listened as the chilling audio played in the courtroom, Jake's voice commanding Eli to make it fast and clean. Some jurors visibly recoiled. Others looked at Jake with a growing mix of shock and disgust. Brianna Collins became the key witness. When she stepped onto the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Her testimony was calm but emotional. She described how she had discovered the messages, how she had watched Jake's behavior shift, and how fear kept her silent until she could no longer carry the weight of what she knew. Her phone, submitted as evidence, contained screen recordings of the messages and files she had found. It also included a detailed timeline she had written herself to preserve everything she remembered in those critical days before and after the murder. Eli Turner had already accepted a plea deal in exchange for his full cooperation. On the stand, he confirmed everything. That Jake had planned the murder, had given him the layout of Carol's home, and had waited in the car while Eli committed the killing. He admitted that Carol had begged for her life. That detail silenced the room. The jury sat in stunned silence as Eli described how Jake had promised him money and protection afterward, neither of which ever came. The defense attempted to discredit Eli by pointing to his criminal past and his plea deal, painting him as a liar looking to save himself. They suggested that Brianna had exaggerated her role to feel important, that she may have misunderstood what she read. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The photos, the messages, the voice memos, and the timeline matched too well to be coincidence. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 2 days. Jake Harmon was found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree murder, and financial fraud. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Eli Turner received a reduced sentence of 25 years under his plea agreement, with no chance of early release. In the weeks after the trial, Carol Harmon's name became synonymous with quiet strength and undeserved tragedy. A memorial fund was set up in her name, benefiting the very nonprofit Jake had stolen from. Her story became a warning, a reminder that evil doesn't always come from strangers. As for Brianna, she disappeared from the public eye. She left her job, changed her phone number, and moved to a different city. The weight of what she had witnessed and the guilt she had carried didn't disappear with the verdict. But she found a strange kind of peace in knowing that she had done the right thing in the end, that she had spoken when it mattered most. She never fully recovered from what she had seen in that phone. Those messages, that voice memo, the knowledge that someone she had loved was capable of something so cold, so calculating. But she carried forward, quietly, away from the headlines and judgment. Her silence had once cost a life. Her courage had helped deliver justice, and in the echo of that truth she rebuilt her own.